What a cool deal, because that was like, say, the Pro Track tire. I mean, that kind of saved stock car racing, because
Right.
the slicks were just, the car counts were getting killed with the late models. In South Bend, Fort Wayne, Angola, I think Kalamazoo, Louisville,
Mhm.
Chicago, Rockford, Wisconsin, all had that same rules. And when you would race those sportsman races, you'd have Wayne Lensing
Right.
and Kirsten would come down from Wisconsin, and that Donna Zock would come from Chicago, and we'd have your South Bend guys that would roll in there with
Right.
Dumpke and Malecki, Trimboli, Blunts, and
Kentucky
Fort
guys
Wayne
would
had a
come up.
plethora of cars.
Yeah. A lot of guys from Louisville would come up.
Yeah, that was neat seeing those guys,
Yeah.
because they had that little different body, the Ventura
Yeah.
bodies, and then
Yeah.
Glenn Ullman, and
Yep.
the '05 car Metters,
Yep.
and and in those races competitive,
Yep.
and
Yeah, they
you know,
were.
and that was like a great series. It was a good feeder series. I mean, we go to they had races on their own. I remember they had an IRP. They had a triple 33s or something on
Yeah.
July 4th, and went down there for that. It's like, that was a really good show.
Yeah, they even put on a series down there. Budweiser sponsored it. It was a special series, like a 5 race series that we ran down there with that car. I think we might have won that series. We won 3 out of 5 races. So.
And then the Grand Marquis series is to talk about that. And then they brought the Grand Marks in, and then the Sportsman just like, okay, we don't need you guys anymore.
Right.
And then the Grand Marks kind of, and then there were like 12, 14 cars.
Yeah.
First couple races was like a celebrity race. And then you finally were getting guys to start buying cars. I know we had about 7 cars up at South Bend that Stutzman had one, Scott Kaiser had one, Jimerson, a couple other guys, Dave True, and a couple guys in Fort Wayne got them. But the series never really took. It was never more than about 16 cars for any race.
Right.
And they were different. It was like the first real template series that you really were
Right.
looking at,
Yeah.
and they weren't good anywhere else. They couldn't
Right.
race with anything else
No,
around.
no, they wasn't.
And,
It wasn't compatible with the weekly late model show or anything.
And then it kind of went by the wayside there. Well, then I say you went into the super lates. Remember, Toledo had a big race, and Rayburn shows up with the dirt car with the wing plexiglass, and that was at that time, because if you followed Speedrome, they were racing up with comp late models, and those guys were just going crazy with the spoilers.
Yeah.
And we had some outlaw bodies up our way, maybe like 10-inch spoiler, the sideboards, but these guys were really going
Right.
extreme. And I remember I went down there because I was in Fort Wayne at that time. Went down to Speedrome. I'm like, my God, look at these cars, are this wild looking. And Rayburn goes to Toledo, blisters the track record. People are like, who's this nutcase? And they were booing it. They didn't like him from the get go because he was an outsider, a guy on dirt. He wasn't, and you were over there, I think.
I was okay with it.
And but he said his car was good by itself, but when it was in traffic, it got kind of twitchy with all the.
He brought that car down to Anderson at one of them open comp shows, and it was so funny because he'd be out there, and he'd go into the corner and he'd drop down on the flat, and then shoot back up on the straightaways, and everybody else was running the track like you run the track, and of course he, within 15, 20 laps he'd burn up his right rear tire every time. I just never forget that. He just dropped down on the flat in the corners at Anderson. And
they had some other guys that would try to run that. Ray Bray was another one that showed up and some success. St. John, he'd had some success, but you put Rayburn out or TJ out there,
yeah,
and it's like, my God. And then then Larry Zent kind of took over the outlaw, the open comp deal. Maybe not so much with the sideboards and the convertible look, but
right.
He was doing some open comp shows, and it's like, my God. But kind of going back to the 80s and stuff with the racing, Fort Wayne, some big shows. We talked about Bill Mitchell doing some promotions, and he had that Summit series.
Mm-hmm.
It was like a radio station series for some races, and your guys were involved in that. And nice fields of cars.
Yeah.
And they had Jess Yates in that mix, and Mike Klein.
Right.
The Coles
Joe
were in
Wallace.
there.
Yeah.
Wallace, you were in there, and it was like, man, this is like an all-star field.
Larry Moyer.
Yeah, Moyer was
Yeah.
another one.
Yep.
Kind of the first enclosed hauler I've ever seen. When he had that deal, he brought it to South Bend, and he could barely pull it through the pit gate, and then he had to park it on the end because he couldn't swing it around right.
There you go.
They're moving another hauler out of the way so we can get in there to fit and stuff there. But just great tradition there at Fort Wayne, and the half mile. Sometimes we're talking about Jimmy. Sometimes the rules, they were having some different ownerships, and they were having some different how the rules should be. So then sometimes cars would get obsolete, and then you'd have to.
It's just that's the way racing evolves.
Late models, and then okay, we're dropping the lates. We're going to go to a semi-late class.
Race is always his worst enemy because he wants to do what's best for him, and in the long run, it's always not the best. So
Exactly right there. And it was kind of cool too. I mean, Moose was in that zero car forever.
Yep.
And sometimes when you were racing, they don't, fans didn't take you so well because they were like, "Oh, that he's got it all made and everything." Moose was the good guy, and
Moose
I'm sure
was a good guy. Was a
and-
little more aggressive.
And there's a couple times he'd get out of the car, he'd win a race, and they would be booing you, and you'd wave, and that would even fuel more fire to the people. Like, well, he's trying to show us up, Like, the guy won the race, give him a chance. But just neat footsteps to follow in, because I mean, the Moose was just amazing. Just all the different stuff with what your dad did, the traveling
the thing
and
Moose
stuff.
could do in a car that, I mean, I even talked about when I was racing, we didn't have power steering, we didn't have cool suits, we didn't have none of that stuff. And Moose, I mean, driving around on 17-inch slicks with no power steering is just, that's a man right there.
It's amazing when looking at those cars back then and the wheels sticking out. And he talked about one getting up and hitting the flat light pole and everything. And I mean, those tires were sticking out that far.
Oh yeah.
And he talked about a show at New Bremen, and I had some pictures that I got that the cars were going into the corner, and almost every car had wheels sticking out. I was like, look at these damn things. Just amazing what they were back in the day.
Right.
And it was, talking to him too was so cool. He could race that car at Bear Field on a Friday night show, race the Redbud 300 or 400 the following night, and then the following week he could race another track. And it was all the same car. Nothing changed. And how that was set up is just like almost too simple.
Yeah.
And now you look at some different traveling series, and this car is not legal to do this. And,
Right.
like the CRA, they're only good for the CRA series, and they can't go to anything else other than a CRA, or they're at a extreme disadvantage, or it just kind of makes it tough to, make it work. And then, kind of like talking about CRA, and at first it was at Central Indiana guys, and he had some guys scattered around. Ross was another one that was just, with that template. After that Hooters series, he was just one of the toughest ones to beat.
Right.
And whenever you did that 400 weekends, you would almost know by the open trailer and who was going to be there. You almost knew the entry list in your head.
Yeah.
And then became the NASCAR guys were getting involved in teams, and they were bringing these drivers in. It was cool to bring a kid in from Arizona, but who was his name? Noah Gadsden.
Yeah.
Or this kid's coming in from, Florida. What's his name? And he's like, I never heard of the guy.
Yeah.
And you look, and then they're in the pits, and it's like, okay, maybe this kid knows. Okay, do you know where Noah's at? Well, I'm Noah. I'm like, oh my God, and it's like the kid lives, he's 14 or 15 years old.
Yeah, they are kids.
And it makes it tough when you go to that 400 show, that, the entry list, because, there's only so many guys following that series that you really know. And then there's other drivers that are popping,
Well, they just pop in and out so quick because they get, they're development drivers, and they're putting them in trucks, or they're putting them in, Xfinity or something. They're just, it's crazy. ARCA just, they're in and out so fast that you can't keep track of who's in what car.
You always read about, like, when Bob Strait raced ARCA, the first couple races he did so well, and I'm thinking, I got he raced, ASA for years. He should be pretty good. And then you have other kids, and then there's other drivers in there, and it's like, man, I just don't know where they're from, or just really heard of them, and they're, this is 300th race or something, on TV, and thinking, wow, but kind of like that's just the way racing is now. It's more about the bio ride stuff, and not, back in the day, it was just like you went through the ranks and did that. Now, when you were racing, was there any favorite drivers you always like? Okay, this guy's going to be the one to beat this track, or this guy here. I mean, I know when he went to New Paris, he always had Skiles and Denny and them, and Plymouth and that, and
I never. I mean, just like today, there's guys that go out there and race just to race, and they're field fillers.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always told my wife I could never do that, because I always went to every track with the mentality that I've got a car to win.
Mm-hmm.
So on occasion, there might be somebody like going to New Paris. I might talk to Denny and talk to him to see if there's anything I can learn, or I would go up in the stands and watch him practice. Sometimes with ARCA, we would run dirt shows, the mild dirts, and they'd bring in, there'd be guys coming like Dean Roper and things, and you'd watch the dirt guys and try to learn from them. But most of the time, we had it set how we was going to do, and just go at it our own.
Mm-hmm.
like I said, I rode with Moose so many laps before I ever started driving. I've watched his feet so many times that I tried to model myself after the way he drove.
Kind of a neat deal. And it was cool with your dad being the owner, with
Right.
Moose, and then yourself. I mean, that just, so we're talking about the enclosed, the rollback hauler with the car one in the back. Paint scheme matched the car.
Yep.
And it was just cool how to go about that because, that hauler always would stand out.
Right.
And just to see it roll in. And, and I remember we had a show at Fort Wayne. And that's when your dad first started showing signs of dementia, I think it was. He came over and looked at the photo books, and then he got lost going back.
Okay.
Because I remember everybody was looking for him at that time. And I don't think it was you that came back there and said, hey, have you seen seen Jimmy? And I'm like, he was just here a little bit ago, look at the photo books. And then he went, and he's overlooking the photo books. And he hadn't looked at them, I think, for some time. And he's, oh my God. And he had a story with almost every car.
Yeah.
And that's this guy.
Yeah.
And Carl was with me, and he goes, who is that guy? He knows everybody. That's Jimmy Stovall. And he goes, I said, Scott's dad, And he goes, oh, really? Okay. That makes sense, And I said, Moose Myers is 0. And I said, he was a car owner. And he goes, that's why he knows these guys so well.
Oh, yeah.
And so he was, really got a kick out of that. But racing's so different now than what it was back in the day. And I remember, you were up there at Angola, race director and stuff, and trying to get guys to go in their spots. And,
right.
It's almost like, God, is this worth it or not?
Right.
Because it's like they want to argue over one spot or something. And
Yep.
I know I was ahead of that guy. And then they go back and they don't want to.
Yeah. Then they want to argue even after the race and come back and tell you how wrong you was. So then you got to back up the tape and show them the tape. And then oh, well, I guess you was right.
Yeah. We
I
even
was-
have arguments about a
Yeah.
photo sometimes on the photo books, or I'll post a picture. That's so and so in that car. I'm like, I got it in alphabetical order from when I did it,
Right.
and this is the name I had.
Yep.
Well, I think so and so was in it back then. I said, is it really that big a deal? So then I go back and I look in the books. I'm like, I'm sure I wrote it down. I can't see messing that up.
As
And,
being a race director, Ron, it could have been somebody else in that car because a lot of times you don't get told that they swap drivers.
Yeah, there goes that. Yeah, the other ones have to
So,
take the tail and
yeah,
everything else.
yeah. Yeah. Oh,
And
race is over and so and so gets out of the car. Well, that's not who we was told was in the car.
or well, if he's in the race, he's at the fence right now. What's going on here? Now, when all the tracks you raced at, any favorite tracks?
I would really have to say my favorite track of all has always been Winchester.
Mhm.
Just always has, probably always will be. I mean, I like the super speedways. I really liked Atlanta before they changed the configuration of it.
Mhm.
But I would say Winchester has always been my favorite track.
And racing right against the wall, and it's the closer you can get to the wall. They always said the not as hard as you'll hit it, But
Less damage and won't hurt as bad.
an incredible wreck. So my Moose was someone with that fire, and I think he had it in '73 or something like that. In turn 3 and 4, I was there for that. And you think as soon as you see a fire there with the banking, oh my God, the guy's going to get killed, And then the Baker wreck and the Dillon and wreck and the Larry Moore, and it was like, man, that track is some wicked.
Well, I ended up on top of Dave Jensen that one year in the 400. Got hit from behind by Bobby Tinkham and shot me into the right side door of Dave Jensen. We was right on the front stretch, and I was halfway up his car.
And those kind of races there, I mean, like a 30-lap race, you can pretty much be okay, I'm ready to go. But then with a 400, it's almost like that drive from, like, say, maybe even Fort Wayne to Louisville on 69. It's like, man, you just got to sit and just hang on
Got to pace yourself.
and then pace yourself.
Yep.
Because, I mean,
Gotta pace
it's like for me from Indianapolis to South Bend, it's that 31 drive. It's like, oh, my God. There's very few turns.
You got to pace yourself and just remember there's only one lap that pays.
Yeah. The last lap there. But it was always good watching the race. And, I say that see Fort Wayne in its heyday and, the demise, what happened there and just, but you're still involved with racing. I remember you were working CRA in the pits at Winchester there.
CRA part-time, and I'm working with ARCA part-time. So, yep, stay involved.
And you always like say it's good to have somebody that knows something about racing involved because you can.
Don't know about that, but
you know some terminology and what some stuff to look for because they bring somebody off the street doing that.
yeah,
And their first thing out of their mouth is we got to be there 8 in the morning and
It's-
we're leaving at midnight.
Yeah, it's been 4 or 5 years ago. We was at Salem for a race, an ARCA race. And after the race was over, we talked to Ron Drager, and the wife mentioned to him, "Would you ever need any help?" And he said, "Oh, sure, we always need help." He looked right at me and he said, "And you're just the kind of guy we need." So
You're like, oh boy.
from that day on, we've been helping them out.
I know, let's say there's some long days at the racetrack.
Oh.
Being official, I know when we go to Winchester and set up, we're there at 8 in the morning, and then if we pull out of there before midnight, it's like, man, if we
Right.
can get out at before 11, we can get that pizza there at Winchester, or then the time you're leaving, it's like, is there any place open? Well, Waffle House,
Yeah.
maybe off
Yeah.
of Clearfield, or Plainfield, and that's really about it before you get to the motel. And it's like, well, so much for that. And then you get home, and it's like you're still wanting to wind down. It's like, damn, it's 2:30. We got to be back up at 7. So then you're,
Yeah.
but it's all worth it though.
Yep,
Good-
absolutely.
Good scenes,
Absolutely.
familiar faces, and even some of the old time drivers still, giving it a go, or
Yeah.
at least they're in the crew chief
Yep.
part of it, or still spectating. And I say it's always good to get a show like this because you never know when's your last time to see some of these
Right.
old timers and that.
Exactly right.
I got with Eddie got with doing this show here, and I said, man, we'll set it up in March or something. I had that COVID for a while, and I kind of didn't do me any favors there and slowed me down for a bit. And I told Eddie, I said, let's get one set up before race season goes. And nice facility. I mean, we're talking about doing it over there in the bar area. And I said, you couldn't even see these photos if we
Yeah.
did it over there and stuff and that. But
No, it's a nice setup.
and
Turned out real good.
yeah, so just get to seem to grow bigger and bigger. And I remember those shows he was doing over at Waynedale
Mhm.
years ago. And my God, there'd be 60, 70 people there, and they had all that food set out.
Yeah.
I remember that one time we were there, and I had those photo books and photos set out. And they had some kid come up there, and he had a hold of some photos, and they were from like Mark Times invited Fort Wayne. They were like 3.5 by 5s. They had a couple boxes, and photos always curl up if you set them out.
Right.
They might lay flat, but as soon as you set them out, they're going to start curling up. This is the way it is. And we're sitting there, and Carl's like, "Who's that guy?" I go, "I have no clue." And so then I said, "Man, look, he's got a lot of loose photos." I said, "I want to go check him out." So he was laying these photos out like he was playing cards, laid them out. And I'm like, "Oh my God, this is the Mark Times invitation." And he goes, "What?" And I said, "This was like a Mark Times invite in '73. There's Deitches, there's Trickle, there's Refner." And I said, if you want to sell any of these, let me know, And he goes, "Oh no, we got these from the basement, and I got these out my mom picked these up somewhere and that." And I said, "Okay." So I'm looking at them. I told Carl, I said, "Man, you need to get over here. Look at these photos. There's some Fort Wayne, there's the Villa shots, and the pictures." Then they started curling up,
Yeah.
and the kid's like, "Oh my God, they're going to get these are getting ruined." I'm like, "What do you mean?" He says, "They're curling." I'm like, "Well, they're going to curl anyways." He goes, he packed them all up, and like 20 minutes later, he was already out the door and gone, And Carl was like, "What's the guy doing? Is he leaving?" I'm like, he saw them curling up, and he didn't understand what was
Right.
going on, and
Right.
he packed them up, and they're gone. Carl's like, "Did you get his name?" I said, "Hell, I didn't know." I said, I was lucky to get a look at him,
Yeah.
for what he did, and
Yeah.
up and gone. And Eddie's like, "What happened to that guy? Did he get mad or something?" I go, "He brought pictures. They curled up.
Panic.
He packed them and left, And I'm like, "Oh," I said, "He probably had 300 great photos there, But that's the way it goes. But it's always good to save the history and like the old memorabilia and that, because so many people they might have been part of it, but never really saved anything, or drivers
Right.
never saved a photo, and and all you can go by is those stories. But if you get some stuff in literature and
Right.
printouts and stuff, and something to look at, and it's good to get these guys out of the house again, because you never, like I say, you never know when it's the last time you'll be able to
You're right.
get them to do that stuff. But thank you for coming out.
All right. Appreciate it.
And I'm sure we'll be seeing you somewhere between here
You
and there.
sure will.
We bounce around enough.
All right.
All right. Thank you, Scotty.
Thank you.
All right, Mike. Boy.